viewer discretion is advised. Across America, there are 330,000 churches of various denominations. In small towns to major metropolitan areas, everyone is protected under the Constitution of the United States of America to worship the religion of their choice. If one wishes to worship Satan or to start a church that worships Satan, that person and church would be protected under the Constitution. In fact, there are many satanic churches in America today. Some may even be in your own neighborhood. But because many operate underground, you may not even know they exist. With their constitutional rights guaranteed, why would they choose to operate in secrecy? With the apparent surge in cults and satanic activity, American Expose went undercover to ritual locations in Virginia, in temples in San Francisco, and into the minds of ex-cult members, most of whom still hide from the very cults they were once involved with. From reports of sacrificed animals, missing children, and chilling murders, reportedly from human sacrifice to the victims of ritual abuse, who for the first time have come forward to tell their stories of abuse, Satanism, and sacrificial murder.
You know, that part of us that took over, that had the rage and the strength and the anger that could take that knife and stop his screaming. And of course afterwards then, they turn it back on you. Now it's your fault. You killed him. If you ever tell, you'll go to prison because you've murdered a person.
Satanism is an anti-religion, developed in reaction to and as an opposition to Christianity. It is the mirror image, the dark side of Christianity, and it shares the same history, mythology, and worldview as Christianity. Satanists regard Satan as equal in power to the Judeo-Christian god Yahweh, and base much of their mythology on Milton's Paradise Lost, wherein Satan was the loser in a civil war fought in heaven before the creation. Satanists believe that Yahweh was not necessarily the more noble of the antagonists, merely the winner, and disaffected by Christianity, they chose to side with its opponent, reversing all Christian rites and symbols, especially those of Catholicism. The root ideas of Satanism go far back to what are called the Gnostic sects, who saw the world about them as profoundly evil, as the real hell, and life on earth as a sentence served in a prison. They took direction from the New Testament that the God of this world was indeed the devil. In the story of the temptation of the wilderness from Matthew 4, the devil offers Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, implying that the gift is his to make. In John 12, verse 31, the devil is called the ruler of this world. And in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4, Paul says that the devil who rules this world has blinded the minds of those who do not believe. Some Gnostics attacked Jesus as the evil son of the evil father, and glorified Judas Iscariot for betraying him, and further believed that the 10 Commandments and other moral rules were intended to keep men in subjugation. A group known as the Cathars kept the Gnostic ideas alive, maintaining that the God of the Old Testament was the devil, and attacking the Roman Catholic Church for worshiping this devil. Some Cathars, according to church records, began to see the devil of the Catholic Church as the true God. A Satanist was one who renounced Christ and his church and blasphemously maltreated its sacred objects, symbols, and ceremonies, who adored the devil in the form of a man or a goat or some other animal, who sang and danced in the devil's honor, and who reveled in child slaughter and cannibalism, indiscriminate sexual orgies, perversion, homosexuality, and every species of crime and abomination. Around the turn of the century, Aleister Crowley became an active anti-Christian and is generally credited with the introduction of Satanism into modern society. Crowley once baptized a toad as Jesus Christ and crucified it, reveling in its agonies. He was the self-proclaimed Great Beast 666, an adventurer, sexual compulsive and heroin addict who relished his media epithet of the wickedest man in the world. One of the world's largest modern-day satanic churches is the Church of Satan, founded in San Francisco in 1966 by Anton LaVey, who teaches that Satanism is a symbol of the material world and the carnal nature of man. Their scripture is LaVey's Satanic Bible, which, as with everything else involved with Satanism, is the opposite of Christianity. The following are just a few excerpts. I am a Satanist. Bow down, for I am the highest embodiment of human life. If a man smite thee on one cheek, smash him on the other. The only way that Christianity can ever completely serve the needs of man is to become as Satanism is now. Satanism condones any type of sexual activity, be it heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, or even asexual. Satanism is a religion of the flesh rather than the spirits. Reports, estimations, and statistics regarding satanic activity and occult practices in general range from the very minimal to the outright startling. In America today, it is difficult to get an accurate picture of what really is going on in the occult world, and more specifically, what is happening in satanic cults. Conservative reckonings estimate 200,000 witches and/or neo-pagans in the United States alone, reported by the Bay Area Pagan Association. And Walter Martin, author of Kingdom of the Cults, said that an estimated 60 million Americans are involved in cults, and another 60 million dabble in the occult. The Cult Research Directory, published by Cornerstone Press in Chicago, now lists more than 400 individuals and organizations, reports Christianity Today. Some professionals in the field, like Professor of Anthropology John Connor, an expert in cult and occult activities, feel that the current occult and satanic activity in America is not the problem the media often portrays it to be.
It's very easy to assume that it's almost to the extent of an international conspiracy, and it really isn't. This is, for young people, some young people, is a normal form of rebellion. There are some, of course, there will be. And out of a population of 250 million, it would be surprising if there weren't some groups that were doing this rather seriously. But by and large, I think a lot of it is just simply overblown, and people get very, very excited about something that is a little bit more than play acting.
While occult activity to some can be casual in nature, there is a more serious, darker side being reported as well, a side which is sometimes frightening and dangerous, even deadly. Sacrifice, taken from the Latin sacrum, meaning holy, and facere, meaning to make. The act of offering the life of a person or animal or some object in propitiation or homage to a deity, something so offered. Eric Pryor, former high priest of San Francisco's New Earth Temple and self-proclaimed ex-Satanist leader, was involved extensively in various levels of occult practice for almost 2 decades. Now a born-again Christian, Eric spends his time exposing and recounting the experiences, often bizarre or evil, that he encountered and even initiated while on the dark side.
Human sacrifices are usually done by third world country orders such as Mukumba and Voodoo, or Voodooan orders. They are done by classical Satanists as well. One of the reasons why sacrifice was first used by the classical European Satanists was as a bastardization of all that was held sacred by the church at the time, hence the virgin sacrifice, hence the sacrifice of the infant, which of course was a representation of the infant Jesus being sacrificed. The spilling of virgin blood, of course, is another reason that they do sacrifices. They would fill the chalice up with this virgin blood and actually pass it around. It's all to make a mockery of that which the church holds sacred. Now, there are other types of human sacrifices. There are sacrifices of appeasement to appease the gods or God. There are human sacrifices that are done for the purpose of taking on the properties of that particular individual. More life force. It's believed by many occultists that the life force is in the blood. So if the blood is consumed, you consume the life force of that person. Now, if you're consuming the blood of a child who has a whole life ahead of themselves, of course you're consuming a lot of life force there. You're consuming something that's new. And, of course, it is, like I said, a bastardization of that which people hold holy. Now, there are many methods of sacrifice. There are sacrifices where people are tied down to altars and the bottom of their feet are slit open and the blood is drained. There's a sacrifice where the heart is removed and the heart is actually dried out and at a later date. They remove the heart and they put the heart aside and it's ground into a poultice, which is then at some point in time used in an incense. There are human sacrifices where there is dismemberment that takes place. Primarily the dismemberment is for the getting rid of the evidence, if you will. So the occultists will dismember bodies and bury parts all over the place. Bodies are sometimes sacrificed not only for the taking on of that person's spiritual life force, but also to harvest bone. Bone it's not uncommon to use bone in handles. It's not uncommon to use bone in various different incenses. It's not uncommon to use body parts in various different folk how shall we say, folk magic rites. Many of the satanic sacrifices are primarily animal sacrifices. Occultists are very smart, knowing that it is very hard to get rid of a human body, or any carcass for that matter. Animal sacrifice is preferred. Well, human sacrifice is preferred by many orders, but let's just say animal sacrifice is what is used more often. There's very few ordinances with reference to that. And so, for instance, I hacked a horse's head off in Modena, New York. It took me a great deal of time to do it. What was I trying to do? I was trying to harvest the strength and power and speed of that animal. Now, mind you, when I was doing this, I was also drinking psilocybin tea at the time, clad only in the sky, or sky-clad, nude, out in the middle of a ranch in upstate New York. And I painted myself from head to toe with the blood of this animal and went on this very bizarre psilocybin trip. When you get involved with sacrifice, it really does do something to you. There is a bloodlust that does develop. I've even sacrificed my own blood. I still bear to this day scars that actually I took a dagger like you see here, a ceremonial dagger like this, and actually stuck myself in the arm as far as I could go and just split my arm wide open and shared the blood with covenants where I mixed various different bodily fluids in it as well as hallucinogenics and shared it as a sacrament. This is not an uncommon thing. A lot of people that are sacrificed for occultic purposes, accepting, let's just say, group sacrifice, okay, happens here in the United States. That I do know. I have intimate knowledge of that. But individual sacrifice is the more common thing. And what I mean by that is an individual magician or an individual occultist, whether it be a Satanist or a ceremonial magician or practitioner of voodoo or whatever, these kind of people are the ones most prone to human sacrifice. When human sacrifice takes place, generally, you don't want anybody around to tell the story.
Eric Pryor is not alone in witnessing sacrifice. While American Expose was investigating in Richmond, a 19-year-old girl who would only give us the name Sarah agreed to tell her equally graphic and chilling story, as long as we agreed to protect her identity.
Some of the most common rituals that I observed when I was practicing was the sacrifice of animals, whether it be a chicken, a cat, or a dog, any animal that was easily accessible. I witnessed the leader of our cult brought in a newborn child and placed it on the altar. The child was drugged to avoid any screaming. We chanted and walked around it, and our leader actually pulled out a knife and cut the child open.
Sarah gave the alleged ritual location as Bell Island, an abandoned pump house in the center of the James River in Richmond, Virginia. Our American Expose crew investigated the location and found satanic graffiti. A cross, and a few spots where fires had been lit, but there was no indication of human or even animal sacrifice. Ritual abuse is defined as a brutal form of abuse consisting of physical, sexual, or psychological abuse involving the use of rituals. Although it is not always satanic, most survivors, like Mary Clausen, state that they were abused as a part of satanic worship.
My abuse started when I was about 18 months old from my real father, and it was sexual abuse up until 4 and a half when they divorced. Through the people that were caring for us while my mother worked or played around, she was very dysfunctional herself, there was a year of satanic, occultic activity, severe abuse for the year, a lot of torture, a lot of ritual. I saw perhaps 9 people murdered and had to take part of it. There was a lot of heavy-duty programming, mind control. And the way we survived it to start off with was to create other parts of ourselves. So we developed MPD, multiple personality disorder. When things started falling apart, I guess it was just time for us to start dealing with issues. I entered therapy, and within 4 months I was in the hospital in a locked unit because I was extremely suicidal. And that's when I met the other parts of myself. I've been in therapy for 4 years now. There are 70 known altars, and we have been doing some fusions. So eventually one day we'll all be one person again.
Many ritual abuse survivors claim that they have been programmed by their former cult and that sounds, sights, and smells still bring back cult feelings and events.
There were certain pictures that had hidden pictures in them, and there were certain sounds, certain phrases that they would repeat. and it would click into the old programming, you know, to remember, to forget, to follow them, to be with them, to just always have it in the back of my mind. If they had a man that they were teaching a lesson for talking and trying to teach us the same lesson, if you ever tell, this is what will happen to you. And we had to watch as they skinned his legs and then started on his arms. And remember hearing him screaming, and they kept telling us that he's hurting, he's in pain, and only you can stop the pain. If you let him hurt, then it's all your fault that he's in pain. And a knife was put in our hand, and there was a snapping, and that's when Jackie was born. You know, that part of us that took over, that had the rage and the strength and the anger that could take that knife and stop his screaming. And of course afterwards then, they turn it back on you. Now it's your fault. You killed him. If you ever tell, you'll go to prison because you've murdered a person.
Other survivors, like one lady we will call T.S., is currently undergoing therapy to cope with the damage caused by ritual abuse. She has drawn pictures to help detail the graphic and horrifying events that happened to her between the ages of 2 and 6.
And causing me to feel guilty about what took place, to feel like it was my fault. They didn't want me to remember, and they used a variety of ways to keep me quiet. One of those ways was to, if I remembered, I was supposed to cut myself and take a knife and cut my wrist, and they had me go through that motion, and I have a scar on my wrist, and I worked through that memory in the picture. They also hung me upside down, used basically a cross in the shape of a Y, and they took whatever was good and turned it into evil. They put me in coffins with bugs and snakes, and then to destroy anything related to Christ or Christianity or a belief in God, they used a type of communion where they actually had me ingest blood and flesh, and drawings show being forced to drink blood. Another method of keeping me silent was to use shock treatment and types of electrodes in a programming ritual. Physical abuse was a part of keeping me silent. My fingers were burned on a stove. I was forced to watch pets killed and put in an oven, and I was told that if I talked, the same thing would happen to me. They would dismember bodies and then hang me upside down over a vat. I think it was acid, I'm not sure, but there were body parts, and they told me they would lower me into the acid if I ever talked about this. In one memory I had, in order to get the blood, they used me as the person to get the blood from. It was basically the lamb, the child of God. And they would put pins and needles in between my fingers, and I would be bled so that they could have communion. The number 3 is an important number to the Satanists because it represents the Trinity, and they are very fond of abusing that age child, as well as abusing the number and using it throughout the rituals. And on my 3rd birthday, I was severely abused. Another way to keep me silent was to use a gun. Pornography, child prostitution brings in big money, and they terrorize children by using common childhood things. In my case, I was given lots of clowns to keep in my bedroom. And if I woke up in the morning after they told me to go to bed, and I told them about what happened, or that the clowns had abused me, they always said it was my imagination, and they thought I was talking about the clowns in my bedroom, and that I just had a bad dream. That's what they will tell their children. When in fact I have recovered memories of being abused with them wearing clown masks. They did force me to participate in the torture and death of a woman who I later recovered the memory of being my teacher. She found out what was happening and she knew too much. And of course I was the one that talked, and so I was the one that had to cause her to die.
As children are in most cases the victims of Satan worship, and animal or human sacrifice is so unbelievable, the credibility of the victim is such that prosecution is very difficult and sometimes impossible. Although there are many serious cases of Satanism, many law enforcement officers agree that most cases, especially those involving teenagers, are simply cases of dabbling, although apparent satanic activity should always be investigated. Probation Officer Kelly McGee has dealt with satanic cases involving teenagers for 10 years.
As a probation officer, a lot of times you deal with young adults that have a number of problems, whether they have family problems, self-esteem problems, things of that nature. We refer a lot of individuals for professional counseling. I believe that in some situations, these individuals are looking for things that may excite them a little bit, make them feel worthwhile, and maybe have some kind of shock value on society. And believe me, satanic activity does bring about a shock value to people, especially John Q. Public. The media hasn't really been able to grasp a hold of what's going on with satanic activity, and a lot of times they'll take little bits of information and make it to the point where it sounds like there's a major problem. I don't believe at this point, I should say that I don't have any factual evidence that there is a major problem with satanic activity and cult activity in this area. But I think you have to keep an open mind and look at all the facts. And anytime you do have a situation where you find a ritual site or you find graffiti that shows some kind of satanic situation, then you need to look at it and investigate it. And I think the big thing is if you keep your mind open. Parents need to keep an open mind. A lot of times parents and people in general will close their eyes to things that they don't want to hear. If you keep an open mind and try to know your kids and learn what your kids are all about, I think that'll be a big step into understanding what's going on, and then being able to identify any problems that may arise or situations that you might see that you might need to look for help and not keep a closed mind.
To better understand something like Satanism, you must first know the signs, some satanic or cult symbols and definitions. Altar. An altar is a table, shelf, or platform set apart from the mundane and used exclusively for religious rites and the ceremonial arrangement of sacred paraphernalia. Baphomet. A Baphomet is the goat-headed god of carnal lust and materiality, commonly depicted as the devil and the most popular deity for modern Satanists. Inverted cross. The inverted cross is the generic symbol of Satanism that represents the rejection of all that Christianity stands for. Pentagram. A pentagram is the five-pointed star used as a mandala for magical conjurations. It represents the human figure with head, arms, and legs, and is more often known as the generic symbol of witchcraft. Anarchy. The anarchy is the symbol of no government and is typically the sign of rebellion against any authoritative power. Pastor Gordon L. Coulter, a former Los Angeles police officer and current pastor at the El Camino Community Church in San Diego, has dealt with youth that have been involved in satanic activity.
Some of the signs to look for among young people have to do with alienation. When kids start to find themselves alone and alienated from the main group at school or the community, that's a good sign to note. Another is, and it goes right along with that, behavioral signs of some contrast, where they were once maybe a pretty happy person, kind of becoming sad. And looking at the dark sides of things, I noted at the last county fair here in San Diego County, there was a lot of artwork of Satanism and demonic things and goat's heads. And those are the kinds of things that I would want to observe, and everyone's aware of that being a theme somewhat in some of the art classes and some of the graffiti and some of the expression among young men and women today. Another thing is the grades start to fall down and the interest in school is less than it ought to be. They start to cut classes and start to hang out with other kids, maybe even away from the campus. And so there are those kinds of social signs. Their friends change. They become more like a group that is different from the ones that you might prefer as parents or you kids might have once been friends with. And the music starts to have a dark lyric, starts to have a message of suicide and gore and worshiping the devil himself. It's not a question of rock and roll or not rock and roll. I think that's going to be here as long as there are young people. But it really is the text of the music. Read it and know it and understand it and decide whether you want that for yourself or for your family.
Even though Americans are protected by the Constitution to practice their religion, many believe that some cults have gone too far. And what exactly is too far? Animal mutilation and sacrifice? Torture? Child abuse? Rape? Pornography? Or even human sacrifice? When does constitutional religion that allows this activity end and law enforcement intervention begin? Many experts believe that most satanic activity is a media exaggeration. But how can so many victims and ex-cult members have such vivid memories if it is just their imagination? With the secrecy of satanic cults, we may never know if future generations are affected by the criminal elements of some cult activity unless we open our eyes and take action before it is too late.
Birds and babies go away, mustn't tell, mustn't say. Mommy will get mad at me, must pretend I do not see. Nothing happened, don't remember. Helter-skelter, now dismember. Witches chant and babies burn. Mustn't talk, it will be my turn.
Letters, comments, and story ideas write to American Expose, 5221 North O'Connor Boulevard, Suite 1000, Irving, Texas, 75039, or fax us at 214-401-2344.